name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. Jesus speaks these words to his followers on the night before his death. They may not know exactly what is going on, but his followers did know that something was up and that Jesus and they were in danger. I'm sure that they were terrified, and yet Jesus doesn't tell them to go and hide. He doesn't tell his followers to go and find safety. He tells them, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." I have to tell you, if I were sitting in that room, I would be very confused by his words. I'd want to say to him, "What on earth are you talking about, Jesus? How are we supposed to find peace in the midst of such danger? How on earth can we be free of fear?" And as I read these words and reflected upon them as I was writing this sermon, I began thinking about various people in my life not in my life, various people I know of in the world who are my heroes and who I aspire to emulate. People who had that confidence and courage and peace that Jesus had. And I began to reflect upon a couple of the lives that I thought of, in particular Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. Now, both of these people were or are, Desmond Tutu is still alive, they're both Christian, and both lived most of their lives in the midst of great evil, and yet they did not run and hide. Both faced down the evil in their midst with great courage, and one of these men spent a big chunk of his life in prison. And both of these men always seemed to radiate a peace that passes all understanding. And I'm sure you've heard of and know something about each of them, but I want to share a little bit of their stories with you today to illustrate what I'm saying. So I'll start with Nelson Mandela. Most of us know him because he was the first black African president of South Africa after the end of the apartheid. However, he was in his late 70s when he was elected to this position. His true life accomplishments came far before his election to this high office. From 1942 to 1963, Mandela worked tirelessly as a leader of a peaceful, non-violent movement against the government of South Africa. The apartheid laws were very similar to the Jim Crow laws found in the southern United States. In 1963, Mandela was arrested and he was convicted of treason for his work, and he spent 27 years in prison where he continued to work tirelessly for the end of apartheid. And I'll say that again, he was in prison for 27 years. It's hard for me to imagine that length of time. And he not only survived, but he continued to work throughout those years for justice for his people. And when he emerged, he was elected the president of his country. To help you understand just how amazing this is, I'll give you a brief description of his life in prison. And this description comes from his own autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. His day began at 5:30 in the morning. At that time, the prisoners had to clean their cells. They had no running water or toilets. They ate breakfast in their cells, and their breakfast consisted of porridge, and this is the most disgusting thing, coffee made from burnt corn. And that was it. After breakfast, they had to stand for inspection. If they didn't pass inspection, they were punished by being put in solitary confinement or losing meals. They were then taken to the courtyard where they had to break rocks into pieces for the morning. At noon, they were given boiled corn to eat and a drink that was made of corn and yeast. After lunch, they continued to break rocks until about 4 p.m., at which point they were again inspected. They were then allowed to clean themselves up, and they were given buckets of cold salt water to do this. At 4:30, they were given supper, which consisted of porridge. Every other day, they would receive a small piece of meat and a few vegetables with their porridge. At 8 p.m., it was lights out and time to sleep. They were allowed 1 half-hour visit a year from family. And this was his life for 27 years. And he didn't crack up. He didn't become angry and bitter. Indeed, he said the experience was the making of him. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. And then there's Desmond Tutu, I think is perhaps my favorite person on the planet. And like Mandela, Desmond Tutu, he is a black South African who became a world leader because of his work against apartheid. And as a young boy, Tutu was not really aware of the subjugation of his people until one day when he was out for a walk with his mother. A white man, a priest named Trevor Huddleston, tipped his hat to his mother. And this was the first time that Tutu had ever seen a white man pay this respect to a black woman. The incident made a profound impression on him, and he decided in that moment that he need not accept discrimination and that religion could be a powerful tool for advocating racial equality. He began his adult life as a teacher, but after only a few years of teaching, he resigned his position because he was no longer willing to participate in an educational system explicitly designed to promote inequality. He went on to theological college and was eventually ordained an Anglican priest. He became the first black person in South Africa to be appointed to a number of positions, including finally the position of Archbishop of South Africa. And he used his position to fight tirelessly against the system of oppression that was apartheid. And he too never became bitter or angry. Indeed, after apartheid ended, he headed the Truth and Reconciliation Committee to bring peace and unity to his country. And even though he's in retirement, Tutu continues to fight for human rights for oppressed people around the world. And he was never arrested as Mandela was, but he could have been. And he put his life, the life of his family members, and his career at risk so that he could continue the struggle against apartheid. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. Both of these men did what they did because of their Christian faith. Both of them clearly exhibited the peace of God which passes all understanding. But how is this so? How could they possess and radiate such peace while living lives of such struggle and deprivation? Why weren't they more afraid? I think the key to the answer to these questions is the words Jesus spoke. I do not give to you as the world gives. The world defines peace as an absence of conflict or a feeling of rest and tranquility. And the world doesn't give peace to everybody. Maybe if you're the right kind of person, rich, pretty, thin, young, straight, white, male, the world might give you its peace. Maybe. Though even for the privileged, peace as a feeling and as an absence of conflict can be easily taken away. The loss of a job, a bad health diagnosis, the death of someone you love, a bad grade in school, a major natural disaster. All these things can take that peace away in a moment. Nothing can guarantee the world's peace. Not employment, not an education, not status, not being good at sports, not money, not possessions, not exercise, not eating well. The world's peace is always temporary and illusory. Jesus' peace is something else altogether. The word that we translate as peace in the Bible is the word shalom in Hebrew. Shalom signals a state of safety and points to wholeness and completeness. This wholeness and completeness that Jesus gives to us is not dependent upon the external state of affairs of our lives. We can be in the middle of a prison for 27 years, as Nelson Mandela was, and know the peace of Jesus. When we are given the peace of Jesus, we know that things will get better. Mandela once said, I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lay defeat and death. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. The peace of Christ that allowed Tutu and Mandela to find beauty, the peace of Christ allowed Tutu and Mandela to find beauty in unsuspecting places. Tutu wrote of his childhood, We knew, yes, we were deprived when we were children. It wasn't the same thing for white kids, but it was as full a life as you could make it. I mean, we made toys for ourselves with wires, making cars, and you really were exploding with joy. And Mandela wrote, "Some mornings I walked out into the courtyard of the prison, and every living thing there, the seagulls and wagtails, the small trees, and even the stray blades of grass, seemed to smile and shine in the sun. It was at such times when I perceived the beauty of even this small, closed-in corner of the world that I knew that someday my people and I would be free. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." The peace of God, which passes all understanding, is the greatest gift Christ could give us, and it is the greatest gift we can pass on to others, to those who don't yet know this peace, and it is the greatest gift we can pass on to our children and our children's children. We waste so much time trying to get the world to give us peace. We make the world's priorities, money, possessions, physical safety, education, status, athletic prowess, physical beauty, youth, we make these things our first priorities, thinking that this will bring us the peace of God which passes all understanding that we crave. And when this doesn't bring us the peace we crave, we just keep trying harder and harder, doing the same things and expecting the same result. What if we were to get off this treadmill? What if we were to accept that the world cannot bring us the peace that we want? Might there be a little more room in us for the peace of Christ? Everything the world gives us can be gone in a moment, and yet we can still have the peace of Christ. Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela knew this. We might not be faced with the same challenges that they were faced with. Indeed, I hope no one here is ever faced with what they faced. But we will experience tragedy, loss, and difficulty in our lives. The world cannot protect us from that. But we can live through the hard times with strength, joy, courage, and yes, peace, if we open ourselves up to the peace that Jesus is offering us. Nothing else really matters. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid. Amen.